Hello there, Vault Dweller. It's good to see you in the flesh that you still have on your body. It's come to my attention that a number of you have been wondering about the feasibility of a certain new technology from the Fallout TV series. Well, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that this technology would certainly be worth sending a knight, a ghoul, and Jinx from League of Legends after. The bad news is that I don't think the show actually needs this technology, or even understands it. Welcome to the facility.
Now entering the facility.
Before we begin today, dear viewer, warning. We will be spoilering most of Season 1 of Amazon's Fallout TV show. So if you have not seen the show yet and you want to, in 15 minutes, you are legally allowed to leave. Now, Season 1 of the Amazon show revolves around this thing, this little glowy capsule device thingamajigger-babababah. In the last episodes of Season 1, we learned that this tiny glowing capsule is in fact
cold fusion. It's limitless energy.
Now, cold fusion implies the existence of hot fusion, and that's the technology you'd be more familiar with. But first, fusion is the energetically profitable process of forcing two less stable atoms together into one more stable atom. This transformation from less stable to more stable releases energy that can be calculated by comparing the masses that you start with and the mass that you end with, and then multiplying this so-called mass defect by the speed of light squared. Though the science said we could do it, siphoning off the energy from, say, deuterium and tritium fusing into helium was purely theoretical for decades. The sun and all stars can do it, but that's because stars have the Mojave melting temperatures and pressures needed to overcome the strong nuclear forces inside of atoms. It wasn't until very recently that humanity figured out how to create these conditions, and we still haven't made it energetically profitable. What stars do and what experiments like those at the National Ignition Facility in the United States do is hot fusion. Cold fusion, therefore, is fusion that occurs at much, much lower temperatures. Temperatures like room temperature, temperatures at which your hair still looks amazing even though you're pushing 300 years old. The good news is that nuclear fusion is many times more energetic than nuclear fission, and so if cold fusion actually existed, it would be worth sending an entire wasteland after. The bad news is that I think the writers of the Amazon show have fallen for misinformation surrounding some of the most infamous experiments in all of science.
Is it bad that I have the hots for a radioactive cowboy now?
No, Arya. We're all Ogglins the Gogglins these days. Today's episode is sponsored by Radiocode. Radiocode is the maker of the world's first pocket-sized radiation detector and spectrometer made specifically for nuclear enthusiasts, science nerds, natural science lovers like you and me. That's right, we actually have a Geiger counter sponsor on the channel. Who would have thought? Ooh, and it gives that satisfying clicky sound. Radiocode's latest, my go-to and current scintillating scintillator, is the 103. It's a sleek, sexy, ultra-fast, and sensitive detector. I've been using it everywhere, from airplane X-ray screeners to mountain hikes. The 103 is a powerful little device for any nuclear enthusiast. It has an isotope identifier, spectrum analyzer, can track radiation with Google Maps over time, provide energy and temperature compensated dose rates and spectrums, has a food testing mode for contamination, and has a mobile and PC app with extra features with even more to come. Here's just one example of the very cool stuff you can do at home with your very own personal scintillator. Here I have a piece of uranium ore. I'm going to move this piece of ore to different distances to demonstrate the inverse square law before my very eyes. So I'm gonna place at the origin. Ooh, that's a spicy meatball. 5 times that distance away. It's 5. 10 times the distance away. 20 times the distance. Quickly plotting these numbers on a graph, we see the famous inverse square relationship. It's science, baby! If you have a nuclear enthusiast friend or family member like me, or are one yourself, go to the comments, go to the description, use that URL, get yourself one of Radiocode's offerings today. It's scintillating. Just listen to how much it clicks. Is that bad? We already went through cold fusion in another episode about a video game with characters that made you confusingly horny, but just to recap, about 100 years ago, scientists discovered that the element palladium could store within it, at room temperature and thousands of pounds of pressure, hydrogen gas, about 900 times its own volume of hydrogen gas. Now, hydrogen can also be heavy hydrogen gas, like deuterium and tritium, which is fusion fuel. And so in 1927, scientists tried to cram so much hydrogen gas into palladium metal samples that it fused at room temperature. Except that didn't work, and so all the way back in 1927, cold fusion was already kind of dead. That was until 1989, when electrochemists Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons made international headlines with the tabletop device you see right here. It used a power source, heavy water, and palladium electrodes. According to the duo, the device would suddenly and without explanation almost double the heat it was generating. They claimed that only fusion reactions could explain this. Scientists around the world, however, were immediately skeptical. The duo didn't initially publish their experimental protocols, which is a big no-no, and when specifics were published, the excess heat reported was 1 degree Celsius, not 20, which could be explained by any number of experimental errors. Not a single scientist was able to replicate Pons and Fleischmann's results, and so, within just a few weeks, cold fusion was again declared dead, and the term became synonymous with a scientific pipe dream. I can totally see why the writers of the Fallout TV show went with cold fusion as their science-y MacGuffin. It's science-y, it's potentially extremely powerful, and it's had anti-government, anti-capitalist conspiracy theories surrounding it for literally decades. Makes it perfect for a Fallout game. However, like having human batteries in a universe that already has nuclear fusion doesn't make much sense, cold fusion in a Fallout universe is a bit confused to me.
Look, I'm just saying that I kind of like that he doesn't have a nose.
No, Arya, I know, we've all gone goo-goo for Goggins. That's all of us right now. Okay, so now it's time to take fictional technology way too seriously, as I want to do. I know that this little pellet thing is supposed to be cold fusion, but what is it? Is it a small nuclear reactor? Is it a small tabletop thing that you put in your... What is it? It looks like a fuel pellet like the NIF would use, but that's just a fuel pellet. It is just heavy hydrogen in there. It's not unlocking some sort of proprietary process. If you could reactivate a fusion reactor in the wasteland, it could power a large area, and that would be cool, but I'm confused about that too. The, chicken lover says that regular hot fusion cores are hard to come by these days, implying that fusion power in the wasteland is mostly, if not totally, gone. And if that's the case, then yes, cold fusion would be much easier to repower the wasteland with, because you don't need, I don't know, a tokamak. However, the show also says that Lee Moldaver has been trying to get Vault-Tec's discovery to the rest of the world for the last 200 years, indicating that cold fusion is some kind of massive improvement on the fusion that they already had. But fusion is fusion. The atoms are the same, the energy released is the same. Cold fusion would not produce more energy than hot fusion. It would be much easier to produce, sure, but if the Fallout universe already has that, hot fusion that's so easy you can put it in your stove, the show is giving the impression that cold fusion is something far beyond hot fusion in terms of energy density, but it's not. It would not be like going from coal power to nuclear power all of a sudden. The show's implication that it would be tells me, a science boy, that some writer on the show was maybe taken in by the very misinformation that made the term cold fusion an insult in the first place. The problems, like bugs in a Bethesda game, continue. It looks like this tube of water is connected to these wires, right? Which are presumably providing power to the wasteland, which we see. Fusion power, however, even in theory, doesn't work like this. Basically, every major power source in history, from coal to oil to natural gas to nuclear, is simply a way to turn water into steam. That steam is then used to turn turbines and thereby generate electricity. This tube looks like boiling water, which is good, but it's certainly not enough for an entire city. Real nuclear fission plants are huge and move thousands of kilograms of steam per second through massive turbines. All we needed for this in the show was the sound of giant machinery spinning up somewhere. Without that, it again implies that this tiny capsule is somehow generating an amazing amount of electricity by itself. But that's not how hot or cold fusion works, even theoretically. And I know it's a TV show and actors need to, be on set next to things, but no matter if it's fission or fusion, you do not want to stand right next to an exposed nuclear glowing thing. Enough nuclear fusion reactions to power, say, Los Angeles would create so many high-energy neutrons, hundreds of trillions of them in fact, that it would immediately kill everyone in the area. There's a reason why fusion reactors are thought to present, quote, the greatest structural materials development challenge in history, and why modern nuclear power plants have entire buildings dedicated to shielding and containment. Unfortunately, shielding doesn't look great on camera. What does look good on camera is the first cool-looking thing if you just, Google cold fusion. I'd be very surprised if this exact device, which is not generating electricity by the way, it's just a vacuum chamber filled with pretty purple plasma that checks for evidence of low-temperature fusion reactions, wasn't the exact inspiration for the prop or the prop master on the show. Pretty close, right? This real device is actually a cold fusion experiment funded by Google, so that's spot on, but it's an experiment, like all of the others, that failed to replicate the Pons and Fleischmann claims from 1989. And again, it's not generating electricity. I know I'm being pedantic here, but I'm worried that just a quick Googling from somebody is the reason why this artifact is cold fusion and not something else that would be a lot better and cooler.
All right then, science boy. If you're so smart, what would you have done?
I'm so glad you asked, Arya. The main tension in the TV show is between the future of humanity and the secrets of Vault-Tec, right? So instead of having cold fusion in a world that already has totally viable sources of hot fusion, you make the artifact something else, something secrety and sciency. If and when nuclear war happens, electromagnetic pulses are going to wipe out the power grid, or at least a lot of it. Even if you have fusion power, you won't have anything to send the power around with. But in my scenario, Vault-Tec knew this. They were actively bringing on nuclear annihilation after all, and along with all the vaults, the company installed thousands of miles of EMP-hardened power cables that connect the vaults across the United States, kind of like the world-spanning cables that make the internet possible. In my scenario, the artifact could then be something like the access codes to enable these power transmitting cables, in effect repowering the country, because the vaults still have their hot fusion power cores. This plan would give enormous power to Vault-Tec, the vaults, and their overseers, just like the show. And this change to the artifact would also give narrative reason for Lucy to return to her vault at some point, for the Enclave and for the Brotherhood of Steel to visit other vaults and discover their secrets, and for the Ghoul to explore more of his Vault-Tec connected past. I don't know, maybe specifically the access codes are a way to break through the hardest possible version of the Fallout minigame we see in the show, something that could be hinted at by Lucy's brother when he starts digging into Vault-Tec terminals in Vault 31. Maybe the codes are all of the Vault-Tec executives' names. Maybe they were developed by Repcon and Mr. House, which gives a reason for Season 2 to go to New Vegas. All of it, at least to me, makes more sense, and none of it invokes ideas that died over 30 years ago.
Hey, that's not bad.
Thanks, Arya. It's almost like it's my entire job. Look, if you want to see science like that in the next season of the Fallout TV show, there's not much we can do aside from Mr. Nolan. Mr. Jonah Nolan, as your friends call you, which I am. Your agents know my agents. Just email me. I'd be happy to science advised on anything and But seriously, I am nitpicking the show here. That's only because I love Fallout so much. Look, accuracy bugs don't have to be a feature. Todd. Until next time.
Now exiting the facility.
Stick around for my full review of the Amazon TV show, but first, thank you so much to all the nerdy staff here at the facility for the direct and substantial support in the creation of this here video. If you want to join the facility, if you want to drape on a silky white lab coat that hasn't been coated with the entrails of rad roaches, that's patreon.com/Kyle Hill. Get into our private members only Discord, get videos early, get private live streams, get your name on Aria in every single video if you support us just enough. Look, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of you that have decided to join the facility. Join them. I thought the Amazon show was absolutely fantastic. To make all of the games canon, 25 years worth of games canon, and then make a new story on top of that was incredibly risky, given how gaming fans aren't the most understanding of population. So for that story to be interesting, for all the visuals to be great, the animation to be great, so many in-game references, the casting is fantastic. Walton Goggins is a character actor I've loved for years who needs to be more famous. I thought everything about it was great. I have almost no notes aside from the entirety of this video.